Across the galaxy, the Force binds all things, connecting every living being in an invisible web of destiny and power. But what happens when something arrives that doesn't give a damn about destiny, the Force, or any mystical energy field? What happens when a man who solved problems with firepower and ego steps into a galaxy that's never met anyone quite like him? The twin suns of Tatooine beat down mercilessly on Mos Eisley, the desert spaceport where the scum of the galaxy gathered to drink, deal, and occasionally kill each other. Inside the cantina, aliens of every species nursed their drinks while a Bith band played their melancholy tune. The air smelled of sweat, spice, and desperation. A typical afternoon in the most wretched hive of scum and villainy the Outer Rim had to offer. Then the air itself seemed to tear apart. A blinding flash of green energy erupted in the middle of the cantina floor, sending patrons scrambling for cover. The light collapsed inward, reality buckling and screaming, before spitting out a single figure who hit the ground in a combat roll. Blasters were drawn instantly, a dozen weapons trained on the newcomer as the teleportation energy dissipated into crackling sparks. Duke Nukem stood up, brushing sand off his red tank top and checking his inventory. Devastator pistols, check. Pipe bombs, check. His signature sunglasses, miraculously unbroken. He cracked his neck, taking in his surroundings with the casual confidence of a man who'd materialized in worse places. Bug-eyed aliens, hairy creatures with bowcasters, humans with the kind of scars that told stories, and enough weaponry pointed at him to level a city block. "Well," Duke said, his voice a gravelly drawl that cut through the cantina's stunned silence. "This sure as hell ain't Kansas." A Rhodian bounty hunter, emboldened by the stranger's apparent lack of concern, stepped forward with his blaster raised. "What are you? How did you get here? Speak or I'll—" Duke's fist connected with the Rhodian's snout before he could finish. The alien went down hard, his blaster skittering across the floor. Duke picked it up, examined it with the critical eye of a weapons expert, then tossed it back onto the unconscious Rhodian's chest. Energy weapon. Decent heatsink, piss-poor grip ergonomics. He looked around the cantina at the various species still pointing weapons at him. "So, who's gonna tell me where the hell I am, and why everyone's dressed for a Halloween party?" The bartender, a four-armed Ardenian with the survival instincts of someone who'd seen countless bar fights, slowly lowered his dish rag. "You're on Tatooine, human, Mos Eisley, and you just assaulted one of Jabba's contractors." "Jabba?" Duke pulled out a cigar from his vest pocket, bit off the end, and lit it with a lighter that had survived dimensional travel. "That a person or a disease?" "Jabba the Hutt," a scarred human smuggler offered from a corner booth, clearly entertained. "Crime lord. Controls half the Outer Rim. You just made a very bad first impression." Duke blew smoke toward the ceiling, his expression unchanging. "Kid, I've killed alien queens the size of skyscrapers. I've blown up more hive ships than I can count. I've saved Earth so many times they gave me the key to the city. Then I lost it in a strip club." He planted his boot on the unconscious Rhodian's chest. "If this Jabba has a problem with me defending myself, he knows where to find me." The cantina remained frozen, patrons uncertain whether this human was suicidally brave or genuinely insane. The moment stretched, tension thick enough to cut with a vibro blade, until the bartender made an executive decision that had kept him alive through decades of criminal clientele. "First drinks on the house," he announced. "Anyone who survives a teleportation accident that spectacular deserves at least that." The tension broke. Blasters lowered. The Bith band resumed playing. Duke strode to the bar, boots crunching on the sand-covered floor, and dropped onto a stool that creaked under his weight. He surveyed the bottles behind the bar, most labeled in languages he couldn't read, before pointing at something blue and glowing. "That one, and keep 'em coming." As the bartender poured, Duke's mind raced beneath his cocky exterior. The teleporter had malfunctioned catastrophically. He'd felt reality twist around him, dimensions folding in ways that shouldn't be possible. Those pig cop bastards had been closing in on his position, their plasma weapons tearing through the warehouse. He'd activated the captured alien device as a desperate gambit, expecting to materialize inside their mothership. Instead, he was wherever this was. Tatooine. Twin suns, which explained the ungodly heat. Aliens everywhere, which wasn't new. He'd fought alongside and against dozens of species. But these aliens weren't trying to invade or enslave. They were just existing, trading, drinking, living. This wasn't an invasion zone. This was their home. The blue drink arrived, and Duke downed it in one gulp. It burned like battery acid mixed with tequila. Perfect. "So what's the deal with this rock?" Duke asked the bartender. "Who's in charge? Who do I need to shoot to get some answers?" "The Empire controls Tatooine," the bartender explained, lowering his voice. "Stormtroopers patrol the streets. Imperial Governor enforces the Emperor's will. But out here in the desert, Jabba's word is law. The Empire leaves him alone as long as he pays his taxes and keeps the spice flowing. Empire, Emperor, Stormtroopers." Duke processed this information, slotting it into familiar frameworks. Authoritarian military government. Sounded like the kind of fascist alien overlords he'd spent his career demolishing. And people just accept this. "Some fight," a hooded figure in the corner said quietly. "The rebellion. They're trying to restore freedom to the galaxy. Most of us just try to survive." Duke ordered another drink. His weapons still functioned. He checked his Devastator pistols subtly while talking, feeling their familiar weight. His tactical HUD in his sunglasses was offline, but that was fixable. His body felt strong, his reflexes sharp. Whatever this place was, he could work with it. The cantina door slid open, and 4 stormtroopers marched in, their white armor gleaming in the dusty light. They moved with military precision, scanning the room until their helmet visors locked onto Duke. "You," the lead trooper said, voice modulated through his helmet. "The human who appeared in an unauthorized energy discharge. You're coming with us for questioning." Duke slowly swiveled on his stool, cigar smoke curling around his face. He looked at the 4 armored soldiers, their blaster rifles raised, then back at his drink. He downed it, slammed the glass on the bar, and stood up to his full height. "I got 3 words for you, boys." Duke cracked his knuckles, a predatory grin spreading across his face. "Come get some." The first stormtrooper never saw the pipe bomb until it was rolling between his boots. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The explosion turned the cantina entrance into a smoking crater. Stormtroopers flew backward through the doorway, their armor scorched and dented, crashing into the sandy street outside. Patrons dove for cover as Duke vaulted over the bar, Devastator pistols already in his hands, their golden barrels gleaming in the smoky haze. "Everybody stay down," Duke shouted, more out of habit than concern. "This is between me and these plastic boys." More stormtroopers poured through the ruined entrance, their training kicking in as they established firing positions. Blaster bolts screamed across the cantina, red energy beams that sizzled through the air where Duke had been standing a second before. He rolled behind an overturned table, his combat instincts cataloging everything. 12 hostiles, standard energy weapons, decent aim but predictable firing patterns, armor that looked tough but had obvious joint vulnerabilities. You boys picked the wrong day to play soldier. Duke rose from cover, both Devastators roaring. The twin pistols fired explosive rounds that detonated against Stormtrooper armor, sending troopers sprawling. Unlike blasters, Duke's weapons carried kinetic force. Each shot hit like a sledgehammer wrapped in C4. A Stormtrooper managed to flank Duke's position, blaster raised for a kill shot. Duke spun, faster than the trooper expected, and his boot caught the soldier in the chest with enough force to crack armor plating. The trooper crashed through a table as Duke grabbed his fallen blaster rifle, examined it for half a second, then tossed it aside. E11. Garbage fire rate. No wonder you can't hit shit. The remaining stormtroopers retreated into the street, calling for reinforcements over their comlinks. Duke pursued them into the blazing Tatooine sunlight, reloading his Devastators with practiced efficiency. Mos Eisley's dusty streets stretched before him. Sand-colored buildings packed tight, locals scrambling for cover as the firefight spilled into their market district. An Imperial patrol speeder roared around the corner, its mounted repeating blaster already spinning up. Duke dove behind a vendor's stall as energy bolts chewed through the metal framework, sending fruits and merchandise exploding in all directions. The Nikto vendor screamed something in a language Duke didn't understand, probably about his destroyed livelihood. "Build the Empire," Duke shouted back, popping up to fire both Devastators at the speeder. The explosive rounds punched through the vehicle's light armor, and the pilot slumped forward. The speeder careened sideways, crashing into a building in a spectacular fireball that sent debris raining across the street. More stormtroopers emerged from garrison positions throughout the district. Duke's tactical mind counted at least 20, with more converging. His HUD might be offline, but his brain still worked like a combat computer. He needed high ground, a choke point, something to control the battlefield. A domed building to his left, some kind of equipment warehouse by the look of it. Duke sprinted for the entrance, blaster fire kicking up sand at his heels. He crashed through the door, rolled, came up firing. 2 stormtroopers inside went down before they could raise their weapons. Duke grabbed one of their thermal detonators, primed it, and tossed it out the door. Fire in the hole. The detonator's blast created a wall of flame and smoke, buying him precious seconds. Duke climbed a maintenance ladder to the building's roof, his muscles burning but his grin never fading. This was what he lived for. Impossible odds, enemies everywhere, and his skills against the universe. From the rooftop, he could see the entire district. Stormtroopers were forming a perimeter, establishing firing lines, bringing up heavier weapons. Professional, coordinated, exactly like the pig cops he'd fought on Earth. Different universe, same fascist tactics. Duke pulled out another pipe bomb, kissed it for luck, and hurled it into the tightest cluster of troopers. The explosion scattered them like bowling pins. He followed up with sustained fire from his Devastators, each shot carefully placed, each kill efficient. His ecosystem surged with every confirmed kill. He could feel his body healing minor scrapes and burns, his confidence regenerating his physical condition just like back home. Whatever physics governed this galaxy, his core abilities still worked. That was all he needed. "Attention!" An amplified voice boomed across the district. An Imperial officer stood atop an AT-ST walker that had lumbered into the square, its bird-like legs crushing vendor stalls beneath massive feet. "Surrender immediately or be vaporized. You have 10 seconds to comply." Duke looked at the walker, its head-mounted blaster cannons swiveling toward his position. He looked at his remaining explosives. He looked back at the walker. Yeah, I don't think so, pal. He jumped from the rooftop onto an adjacent building, scrambled across its surface, and leaped onto the walker's hull before the pilot could track his movement. The metal was hot enough to sear his palms, but Duke had endured worse. He climbed to the viewport, ripped open an access panel with his bare hands, and shoved 2 pipe bombs into the walker's internal systems. Knock, knock. Duke kicked off the walker, falling 10 feet to land in a roll as the vehicle exploded from within. The AT-ST's legs buckled, and the entire machine toppled sideways, crushing the Imperial officer who'd been barking orders beneath its collapsing bulk. The remaining Stormtroopers hesitated. Their formations broke. Duke could see it in their body language, fear replacing training. They'd expected to arrest one man. Instead, they'd walked into a meat grinder. Who's next? Duke stood in the middle of the smoke-filled street, Devastators raised, his tank top soaked with sweat and spattered with blast residue. Come on, I've got enough ammo to kill every last one of you plastic-wrapped pricks. The Stormtroopers retreated, calling for orbital support, Imperial intelligence, anyone who could handle this lunatic. Duke watched them fall back, then turned to survey the destruction. Burning speeder wreckage, collapsed buildings, unconscious or dead Stormtroopers scattered across 3 blocks. His first 20 minutes in this galaxy, and he'd already declared war on the local government. Not bad for a Tuesday, Duke muttered, holstering his weapons. The locals emerged slowly from cover, staring at him with expressions ranging from awe to terror. An elderly Twi'lek woman approached cautiously, her head-tails twitching nervously. The Empire will send more, she said in accented basic. They'll level this entire district for what you've done. Then I guess I'd better make sure I'm worth it. Duke lit another cigar, the flame bright in the settling dust. Where can a guy get some real firepower around here? Because something tells me those plastic soldiers were just the warm-up. A slow clap echoed from a shadowed alleyway. Duke's hand moved to his pistol, but the figure that emerged held no weapon, just a datapad and an expression of calculated interest. The man wore clothes that screamed criminal middleman. Expensive but practical, weapons hidden but certainly present. And the kind of smile that meant trouble wrapped in opportunity. Impressive performance, the man said in smooth basic. Jabba the Hutt would like to speak with you. He's always interested in meeting unique talents. Duke blew smoke toward the twin suns. Does this Jabba pay well? Very well, for those who prove worthy. Then lead the way, friend. Duke checked his ammunition count, reloaded both Devastators, and adjusted his sunglasses. Time to meet the local boss. Jabba's palace rose from the Tatooine desert like a malignant tumor, its ancient stone walls radiating menace even in the blistering heat. Duke rode in the back of a land speeder driven by Jabba's representative, a Duro named Kithaba, who'd barely spoken since leaving Mos Eisley. The journey took 2 hours across endless dunes, giving Duke plenty of time to assess his situation and catalog everything he'd learned. This galaxy operated on familiar principles: power, money, and violence. The Empire was the authoritarian government everyone feared. Jabba was the crime lord everyone obeyed when the Empire wasn't looking. The rebellion was the insurgent group nobody mentioned except in whispers. Standard power dynamics, different planets. Duke could work with this. The land speeder descended into the palace's subterranean garage, where alien guards with exotic weapons patted Duke down. They confiscated his Devastators, his pipe bombs, his boot knife, and even his lighter. Duke let them, grinning the whole time. Amateurs always thought taking the obvious weapons meant you were disarmed. The palace interior was a maze of corridors lit by flickering torches, the air thick with incense that barely masked the smell of decay and spice. Creatures scurried in the shadows, some small and rodent-like, others large enough to be dangerous. Duke mentally mapped every turn, every exit, every guard position. Old habits from dungeon-crawling Earth's alien hives died hard. The throne room doors opened with a mechanical groan, revealing a chamber that looked like every crime boss's fever dream Duke had ever seen. Dim lighting, dancing girls on raised platforms, guards with weapons that ranged from primitive force pikes to modern blaster rifles, and dozens of hangers-on representing every species in the criminal underworld. And at the center of it all, sprawled on a massive dais like a mountain of diseased flesh, was Jabba the Hutt. Duke had fought aliens of every conceivable design, tentacled horrors, insectoid nightmares, biomechanical abominations. But Jabba was something uniquely repulsive. A giant slug-like creature, easily 15 feet long, with bulbous yellow eyes that tracked Duke's approach with predatory intelligence. The Hutt's mouth was a gaping maw filled with sharp teeth, and his corpulent body glistened with secreted slime that stained the cushions beneath him. "Well," Duke said, stopping at the base of the dais with his hands on his hips. "You're one ugly son of a bitch." The throne room fell silent. Guards tensed. Someone in the crowd gasped. Jabba's protocol droid, a golden humanoid automaton, stammered in binary before switching to accented basic. "Master Jabba says you are either very brave or very stupid to insult him in his own palace. Tell your boss I've killed things that make him look like a beauty pageant contestant." Duke cracked his neck, utterly unfazed. "And I'm only here because your boy said there's money involved. So let's skip the part where you threaten me and get to the part where you make an offer." Jabba's laugh was a wet, rumbling sound that reverberated through the chamber. He spoke in Hutes, his voice like stones grinding in gravel, while the protocol droid translated. "Master Jabba finds your audacity refreshing. Most who enter his presence grovel. You destroyed an Imperial garrison, killed 27 Stormtroopers, and demolished an AT-ST walker. This attracts unwanted attention, but it also demonstrates skills Jabba finds valuable. Keep talking." Duke pulled out a cigar, then remembered they'd taken his lighter. A Twi'lek dancer tossed him hers from her platform. Duke nodded his thanks, lit up, and blew smoke toward the ceiling. "I'm listening." "Master Jabba has a problem. A rebel spy has infiltrated his organization, stealing shipment manifests and reporting his activities to the Alliance. This spy has eluded Jabba's best hunters. Master Jabba wants this spy eliminated, publicly, brutally, as a message to others who might consider betrayal." Duke considered this. Back on Earth, he'd never concerned himself with politics, just killed the aliens trying to invade. But this galaxy's politics were murkier. The Empire sounded like fascist bastards, but the rebels were insurgents hiding among civilians. Jabba was a crime lord dealing in slavery and drugs, based on the evidence around him. Messy, complicated, the kind of situation Duke usually avoided. "What's the pay?" Duke asked. 50,000 credits, enough to buy a ship, weapons, and passage to anywhere in the Outer Rim. Plus, Jabba's favor, which is worth more than credits in certain circles. Duke did the math. He had no ship, limited ammunition, and zero understanding of this galaxy's layout. He needed resources, information, and time to figure out how to get back to Earth, or if he even wanted to. Jabba's offer provided all three. But there was another angle. Duke knew exactly what he was. A killer with a flexible moral compass who'd spent his career slaughtering alien invaders. That didn't make him a saint, but it didn't make him a monster either. The rebels were fighting fascists. That counted for something. Then again, everyone used everyone in war. The rebels probably had blood on their hands too. "I'll need my weapons back," Duke said, "and details on this spy. After that, we'll see." Jabba rumbled something, and the droid translated. "Master Jabba agrees. Your weapons will be returned. But understand, if you betray Jabba, your death will be slow and your suffering legendary. Many have tried to deceive the Hutt. All have failed. Kid, I've been threatened by alien queens, cyborg pigs, and nuclear-armed megalomaniacs." Duke grinned around his cigar. "You're gonna have to try harder than that." A Gamorrean guard brought Duke's weapons on a tray. He strapped on his Devastators, checked the pipe bombs, and pocketed his lighter. The familiar weight settled his nerves. Armed, he was dangerous. Unarmed, he was just creative about the violence. The droid presented a datapad with a holographic image. A human male, mid-30s, wearing mechanics coveralls. "This is Torin Vel. He works in Jabba's docking bay, maintaining the Hutt's fleet. Intelligence suggests he transmits data to the rebellion using encrypted communications. He's cautious, paranoid, and armed. Last seen in Mos Espa, 70 kilometers west." Duke studied the face, committing it to memory. Torin looked tired, haunted, the expression of someone who'd seen too much and couldn't look away. A true believer, probably. The dangerous kind. "I'll find him," Duke said, pocketing the datapad. "But I work alone. No babysitters, no supervision, no Gamorrean goons following me around. You'll get your spy when I'm done, not before." Jabba conferred with a Twi'lek majordomo who whispered in his ear hole. The Hutt's eyes narrowed, calculating before he spoke again through the droid. "Master Jabba agrees to your terms. But be warned, other hunters seek this spy as well. Boba Fett himself has taken interest in the contract. If he claims the target first, your opportunity for payment ends." Duke's ears perked up. "Boba Fett? That a person or a restaurant?" "The most feared bounty hunter in the galaxy," the droid explained. "Mandalorian armor, no mercy, perfect record. He's killed Jedi, Wookiees, and beings far more dangerous than you." "Sounds like my kind of guy." Duke headed for the exit, boots echoing on the stone floor. "Guess I'll introduce myself if we cross paths." As he left the throne room, Duke caught sight of one of the Twi'lek dancers, green-skinned, barely clothed, with a metal collar around her neck. She looked at him with desperate eyes, silently pleading. A slave, one of many from the looks of it. Duke's expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. He'd seen slavery before, human and alien, usually at the hands of the bastards he killed. Jabba was accumulating a debt, whether the slug knew it or not. But first things first. Find the spy, get paid, acquire resources, then decide who deserved killing in this backward galaxy. Outside the palace, Kithaba waited by the land speeder. "Where to?" the Duro asked. "Mos Espa, and step on it." Duke settled into the passenger seat, checking his weapons. "I've got a rebel to hunt and a reputation to build." The twin suns beat down as they sped across the desert, leaving Jabba's palace shrinking in the distance. Duke watched the dunes roll past, his mind already 3 moves ahead. This galaxy had no idea what it was in for. Mos Espa was Mos Eisley's slightly less homicidal cousin, still a wretched hive of scum and villainy, but with better civic planning and fewer cantina explosions per capita. Duke prowled the dusty streets as evening fell, twin suns painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The marketplace bustled with merchants closing their stalls while moisture farmers and spacers haggled over last-minute deals. Duke had ditched Cathaba 3 blocks back. The Duro was a decent driver, but a lousy tail, and Duke worked better without witnesses. He'd changed tactics from the Mos Eisley Garrison massacre. No pipe bombs, no firefights that would bring every Imperial soldier within 50 clicks. This was hunter's work, not soldier's work. Track the target, confirm identity, eliminate quietly. Relatively quietly, anyway. Duke had never been great at subtle. The docking bay district sprawled on Mos Espa's eastern edge, a collection of corrugated metal hangars housing everything from personal speeders to bulk freighters. Duke moved through the crowds like a predator, his instincts reading body language and threat potential automatically. A Rhodian with nervous eyes, pickpocket. 2 Aqualish arguing over a sabacc debt, ignore. A human woman watching the crowd too carefully, Imperial informant probably. Duke lit a cigar and kept moving. Jabba's intelligence put Torinvel in Bay 27, working the night shift on a spice freighter. Duke found the hangar easily enough, its doors open to reveal a battered YT-1300 light freighter undergoing repairs. Sparks showered from welding torches, and the smell of ozone and hydraulic fluid filled the air. 3 mechanics worked on the ship. Duke eliminated 2 immediately. Wrong species, wrong build. The third matched Torin's hollow image perfectly. Human male, greasy coveralls, tool belt sagging with equipment, and the hyper-aware posture of someone expecting trouble. Duke approached the hangar's entrance, hands casually near his Devastators. Torin was under the freighter's belly, working on the landing gear hydraulics. 2 other mechanics, a Celestin and a Doug, were focused on the port thruster assembly. "Torinvel?" Duke called out, his voice echoing in the hangar. The mechanic froze for a heartbeat before sliding out from under the freighter. He stood slowly, hydro spanner in one hand, the other hovering near a tool belt that definitely concealed a blaster. His face was haggard, lined with stress and sleepless nights. "Who's asking?" Torin's voice was careful, controlled. "Name's Duke. I'm here to talk about your side job." Duke took a long drag on his cigar, letting the implications hang. The one that involves encrypted transmissions and Rebel Alliance dead drops. Torin's hand moved toward his concealed weapon. Duke's hand didn't move at all, didn't need to. The threat was implicit. "I don't know what you're talking about," Torin said. But his eyes told a different story. They flicked toward the exits, calculating escape routes. "Sure you don't. And I'm sure Jabba's gonna believe that when I drag your corpse back to his palace." Duke stepped into the hangar, boots crunching on metal shavings. "But here's the thing, Torin. I'm not interested in what you've done. I'm interested in why." That caught the mechanic off guard. His hand hesitated, confusion replacing fear. "What?" "The rebellion's fighting the Empire. The Empire looks like every fascist alien invasion force I've ever blown to hell. Jabba's a slug-faced crime lord who deals in slaves and spice." Duke gestured with his cigar, ash falling to the hangar floor. "So before I ventilate your skull, I want to know why a guy with your skills is risking his life to leak shipping manifests instead of just leaving this desert hellhole." Torin studied Duke with the intensity of someone trying to determine if this was an elaborate interrogation technique. The Celestin and Doug had stopped working, watching the confrontation nervously. "You really want to know?" Torin asked quietly. "Wouldn't ask if I didn't." Torin set down the hydro spanner, his hand moving away from the concealed blaster, a calculated risk. Because someone has to. The Empire isn't just fascist, they're genocidal. They destroyed Alderaan, an entire planet, billions of people vaporized to make a point. They enslave non-humans, crush dissent, and rule through terror. His voice gained strength, conviction burning through the exhaustion. Jabba enables them. His spice funds Imperial projects. His slave trade provides labor for their war machine. Every shipment I report to the rebellion is one less resource for the Empire. Duke listened, processing. Planet-destroying superweapons, genocide, slavery on an industrial scale. It was worse than he'd thought, and he'd thought it was pretty bad. "And if you get caught?" Duke asked. "Then I die knowing I did something that mattered." Torin's jaw set with grim determination. "Better than living on my knees." Duke took another drag, smoke curling around his face. This was the problem with trying to keep things simple. The universe kept throwing complications at him. Torin was a true believer, a man willing to die for a cause Duke instinctively respected. The kind of guy Duke would have bought a beer back on Earth, assuming he wasn't about to kill him for 50,000 credits. "Here's my problem," Duke said conversationally. "I've got no stake in this galaxy's politics. I showed up yesterday through a teleporter accident, kicked the Empire's teeth in because they tried to arrest me, and took Jabba's contract because I need resources. You're a job, nothing personal. Then do the job." Torin's hand drifted back toward his blaster. "But I'm not going quietly." "Didn't expect you to." Duke grinned. "But here's the other problem. I've spent my whole life killing alien invaders and saving people. It's kinda my thing. And from what I have seen, the Empire fits the bill for alien invaders, even if they're technically human. Authoritarian pricks always look the same, no matter what galaxy you're in." Torin's expression shifted from resignation to confusion. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Jabba can kiss my ass." The words were barely out of Duke's mouth when the hangar's rear entrance exploded inward. Not from explosives, from a missile that streaked through the opening and detonated against the far wall. Duke dove behind a tool cart as the Celestin mechanic screamed, scrambling for cover. The dug wasn't fast enough. Shrapnel from the blast caught him mid-leap, and he went down hard. Through the smoke and flames, a figure entered the hangar with measured, deliberate steps. The armor was instantly recognizable even to Duke, who'd been in this galaxy less than 24 hours. Battered green and red plates, a distinctive T-shaped visor, weapons bristling from every surface, a jetpack on the back, a rifle in his hands that looked capable of punching through a tank. Boba Fett. "The bounty is mine, Vel." Fett's voice was cold, mechanical through his helmet's vocabulator. "Jabba offered double the contract for your capture. I always collect." Duke stood from behind the tool cart, Devastators already drawn. "Hate to break it to you, pal, but I just quit Jabba's contract, which means this guy's under my protection now." Fett's helmet turned toward Duke, the expressionless visor somehow conveying surprise. "You're the Terran, the one who destroyed the garrison in Mos Eisley." "That's me, Duke Nukem, and you must be Boba Fett." Duke's grin was wolfish. "Heard you're supposed to be the galaxy's best hunter. Gotta say, that entrance was pretty badass." "Step aside," Fett said flatly. "You don't want this fight." "See, that's where you're wrong." Duke took a step forward, positioning himself between Fett and Torin. "Because I love this fight. New galaxy, new enemies, same old Duke. So how about we skip the negotiation and get to the part where I kick your armored ass across this hangar?" Fett's response was to raise his EE-3 carbine rifle and fire. Duke moved before the trigger pull, combat instincts honed by 1,000 battles. The blaster bolt scorched the air where he'd been standing as he rolled, came up firing. Both Devastators roared, explosive rounds hammering toward the bounty hunter. Fett's jetpack ignited, launching him sideways in a burst of flame. He twisted in midair, firing as he flew, bolts tracking Duke's position with professional precision. Duke dove behind the freighter's landing strut as energy blasts chewed through metal. "Torin, get your ass out of here," Duke shouted, blind firing around the strut. "I'm not leaving you." Torin had his blaster out, firing at Fett from behind an equipment crate. "I don't need a babysitter. Go!" Fett landed on the freighter's hull, his armor's sensor suite tracking both targets. He fired a wrist rocket at Torin's position. The mechanic barely rolled clear as the crate exploded, tools and parts becoming deadly shrapnel. Duke seized the moment. He sprinted across the hangar floor, firing both Devastators in a sustained barrage that forced Fett to hunker behind the freighter's sensor dish. The bounty hunter returned fire, his carbine's bolts precise and deadly. But Duke was already moving again, using every bit of cover. This wasn't like fighting Stormtroopers. Fett was a professional, calm under fire, using his armor's systems with practiced efficiency. Duke could respect that. Hell, he almost liked the guy. But liking someone never stopped Duke from winning. Duke grabbed a heavy fusion cutter from a workbench and hurled it at Fett's position. The bounty hunter's jetpack flared, lifting him clear as the tool clanged off the freighter's hull. Fett twisted mid-flight, firing his wrist-mounted flamethrower. A cone of fire engulfed the space Duke had occupied seconds before, turning tool carts into molten slag. "You're fast," Fett acknowledged, landing in a crouch. "But speed won't save you." "Buddy, I've dodged plasma beams from cyborg pigs while carrying alien queens through collapsing hives." Duke vaulted over a repulsor sled, firing as he moved. "Your rinky-dink flamethrower's just foreplay." One of Duke's explosive rounds clipped Fett's shoulder pauldron, spinning him sideways. The armor held, but the impact was enough to throw off his next shot. Duke pressed the advantage, closing distance with reckless aggression that clearly surprised the bounty hunter. Most targets ran from Boba Fett. Duke ran toward him. Fett launched a fiber cord whip from his gauntlet. The cable wrapped around Duke's wrist, yanking him forward. But instead of resisting, Duke used the momentum, diving into a roll that brought him within striking distance. His boot connected with Fett's knee joint, not hard enough to damage the armor, but enough to disrupt his stance. They grappled, two warriors testing each other's strength. Fett's armor gave him enhanced power, servos augmenting his muscles. Duke had raw, earth-trained physique and decades of close-quarters alien combat. For 3 seconds, they were locked in brutal equilibrium before Fett's helmet cracked forward in a vicious headbutt. Duke's sunglasses shattered. Blood streamed from his nose, but his ego system was already surging, converting the pain and adrenaline into regenerative energy. He could feel his body healing in real time, the damaged cartilage knitting back together. "That all you got?" Duke's grin was bloody and genuine. Fett activated his jetpack point blank. The exhaust wash should have cooked Duke alive, but he'd already twisted away, using Fett's own fiber cord as an anchor to swing himself clear. The cable snapped under the strain, sending both fighters stumbling backward. Across the hangar, Torin had reached a maintenance speeder. He looked back at Duke, torn between escape and honor. "Go!" Duke roared, snapping off 3 shots that forced Fett to take cover behind a fuel drum. "I'll find you later." Torin's speeder roared to life and screamed out of the hangar into the Tatooine night. Fett raised his carbine to shoot the fleeing target, but Duke's Devastator round exploded the fuel drum in a fireball that engulfed the bounty hunter's position. When the flames cleared, Fett stood unscathed, his armor's thermal shielding having absorbed the blast. But Torin was gone, disappeared into the warren of Mos Espa's streets. "You just made a very expensive mistake," Fett said, his vocabulary giving the words an emotionless quality that somehow made them more threatening. "Jabba doesn't forgive betrayal. Neither do I. Join the club." Duke ejected spent magazines from his Devastators, slamming in fresh ones. "I've got a whole list of people who want me dead. The Empire, Jabba, probably half this rock by now. What's one more bounty hunter?" Fett holstered his carbine, a gesture that sent alarm bells screaming through Duke's combat instincts. When a professional put away his primary weapon mid-fight, it meant he was switching to something worse. The bounty hunter's gauntlet popped open, revealing a launcher Duke hadn't seen before. The projectile that fired was small, fast, and whistling. Sonic charge. Duke recognized the sound a half-second before the detonation. He dove behind the freighter's landing gear as the charge exploded in a spherical blast wave that warped the air itself. The shock wave hit like a physical thing, collapsing his lungs and rupturing both eardrums. He crashed against the hangar wall, his vision swimming, tasting blood. Through the ringing in his ears, Duke heard Fett's boots approaching, methodical, unhurried. The walk of someone who knew the fight was over. Duke's hand fumbled for a pipe bomb. His fingers felt thick and clumsy, his coordination shot to hell. But muscle memory took over. Twist the detonator, count to 3, throw. The motion was automatic, ingrained from 1,000 similar moments. The pipe bomb clattered across the hangar floor. Fett's jetpack fired instantly, carrying him toward the ceiling as the explosion turned the floor into a crater. Debris pelted his armor, but he'd already anticipated the tactic. Professional recognizing professional, even in defeat. Duke used the distraction to stumble to his feet, his ego system working overtime to repair the sonic damage. His healing was fast, but not instantaneous. He needed time, space, and Fett wasn't giving him either. The bounty hunter descended like a raptor. Wrist blades extended for a killing strike. Duke brought up his Devastator, fired point blank. The explosive round hit Fett's chest plate dead center, finally cracking the armor and sending the bounty hunter crashing backward. Both warriors went down, both bleeding, both damaged. The hangar fell silent except for the crackle of flames and the groan of stressed metal. Duke pushed himself to his knees, spitting blood. Across the shattered hangar, Fett was also rising, moving slower than before. The chest plate damage had hurt him, possibly cracked ribs beneath the armor. "You're good," Fett admitted, his vocabulary crackling with interference. "Better than most, but this isn't over." "Never thought it was." Duke got to his feet, swaying slightly. "But here's the thing, Fett. I just blew into this galaxy yesterday. I've got no ship, no credits, and apparently a death wish for pissing off every major faction in one day. But I'll be damned if I let some Mandalorian reject take down a rebel spy who's actually trying to do the right thing." "The right thing?" Fett's helmet tilted, almost curious. "There is no right thing in this galaxy. Only survival and credits. You'll learn that, or you'll die learning it." "Maybe." Duke holstered his Devastators, the gesture deliberate. "Or maybe I'll teach you assholes a different lesson. That sometimes you fight because it's the right thing to do, not because someone's paying you." Fett studied him for a long moment. The bounty hunter's reputation was built on ruthless efficiency, but also on cold calculation. This fight had cost him damaged armor, lost prey, and time. Continuing would cost more, and Duke clearly wasn't going down without taking Fett with him. "This isn't finished," Fett said finally. Next time we meet, one of us dies. Looking forward to it. Duke's grin was all teeth and blood. Bring that A-game next time. This was just a warm-up. Fett's jetpack ignited, carrying him through the hangar's roof access in a burst of flame. Within seconds, he was gone, leaving only the echo of rocket fire and the smell of ozone. Duke collapsed against the freighter's landing strut, his body finally giving in to the damage. His ego system worked steadily, knitting torn muscles and shattered cartilage. In an hour, he'd be functional. In 3, he'd be combat ready. But right now, he just needed to breathe. The Celestin mechanic emerged from behind an overturned tool cart, his large eyes wide with shock. You just fought Boba Fett and lived. Yeah, well. Duke fumbled for a cigar, found one miraculously intact in his vest pocket. I've had worse Tuesdays. Jabba will kill you for this. The Empire will hunt you. Every bounty hunter in the sector will want your head. Duke lit the cigar with his salvaged lighter, took a long drag, and looked up at the Tatooine night sky through the shattered hangar roof. Stars he'd never seen before glittered in unfamiliar constellations. Somewhere out there was Earth, his world, his life. But that seemed very far away right now. Kid, I just declared war on this entire dust ball. Duke exhaled smoke toward those alien stars. Might as well make it interesting. The Celestin shook his head in disbelief and started salvaging what he could from the wreckage. Duke sat there, bleeding and grinning, already planning his next move. He needed to find Torin, needed to understand this rebellion better, needed weapons, a ship, and probably a better plan than shoot everything that moves. But first, he needed to heal. And then he needed to have a very pointed conversation with a certain slug-faced crime lord about loyalty, betrayal, and what happened when you tried to manipulate Duke Nukem. Jabba wanted a message sent? Duke was about to deliver one the whole galaxy would remember. Duke found Torin 3 hours later in a rundown cantina on Mos Espa's south side. The kind of establishment where the bartender kept a blaster under the counter and nobody asked questions. The mechanic sat in a corner booth, nursing a drink that looked suspiciously like the antifreeze, his blaster on the table within easy reach. He didn't look surprised when Duke slid into the booth across from him, just exhausted. "You're alive," Torin said flatly. "Disappointed?" Duke signaled the bartender for whatever rotgut they were serving. His nose had healed completely, his eardrums regenerated, and his ego system had restored him to fighting condition. The perks of being Duke Nukem. Surprised, Boba Fett doesn't leave survivors. Torin studied Duke with new respect mixed with wariness. "You really just walked away from Jabba's contract? For someone you don't even know? Don't get sentimental on me, kid. I've got my reasons." Duke's drink arrived. Something blue and smoking. He downed it in one gulp and immediately regretted it. Tasted like battery acid mixed with soap. The Empire's a bunch of fascist pricks. Jabba's a slaving piece of shit, and you're fighting the good fight. Simple math. Nothing simple in war. Torin leaned back, his hand never far from his blaster. The rebellion isn't some romantic revolution. We blow up supply depots where conscripts work. We sabotage infrastructure that civilians depend on. People die, some guilty, some innocent. It's ugly, brutal work. War usually is. Duke lit a cigar, ignoring the bartender's dirty look. Back home, I fought alien invasions. Killed thousands, probably tens of thousands of the bastards. Leveled cities, destroyed their technology, showed zero mercy. You know why? Because they were invading? Because they gave humanity no choice. Negotiate with a brain-eating alien horde? Good luck. Try to reason with genocidal pig cops? They'll shoot you while you're talking. Duke blew smoke toward the stained ceiling. Your empire destroyed an entire planet. Billions dead. That's not war, that's terrorism on a galactic scale. Far as I'm concerned, anyone fighting that deserves a chance. Torin's expression softened slightly. So what now? You're a wanted man. Jabba will send every hunter, thug, and assassin he has after you. The Empire already wants you for the Garrison massacre. You've got no allies, no resources, and you just burned the only lucrative contact you had. Story of my life. Duke grinned. But I'm still breathing, still fighting, and I just went toe-to-toe with your galaxy's most feared bounty hunter and walked away. That's gotta count for something. It counts for making you a target. Torin hesitated, then made a decision. But it also makes you valuable. The rebellion needs people like you, skilled, fearless, and crazy enough to take on impossible odds. Whoa, slow down there, recruiting officer. Duke held up a hand. I didn't say I was joining your rebellion. I said I respected what you're doing. Big difference. Then what are you doing? Torin's frustration showed. You can't survive alone on Tatooine. Jabba controls the criminal networks. The Empire controls everything else. You need allies. Duke considered this. Torin was right. He was operating in hostile territory with limited intelligence and dwindling resources. His Devastator ammunition was down to 3 magazines. His pipe bombs were nearly depleted. He had no ship, no safe house, and apparently every major power structure wanted him dead. On the other hand, he'd faced worse odds. That time in Duke Burger, when the aliens had him surrounded, no ammo, and he'd fought his way out using a spatula and pure spite. Or when he'd crashed a UFO into the alien mothership while both were exploding. Duke's entire career was built on turning impossible situations into unlikely victories. Here's what I'm doing, Duke said finally. I'm finding a way off this rock, getting a ship, some real firepower, and figuring out this galaxy's power structure. Then I'm deciding who needs killing and in what order. That's not a plan. That's suicide with extra steps. Kid, I've been committing suicide with extra steps since before you were born. It's my specialty. Duke leaned forward, his voice dropping. But I'll make you a deal. You get me in touch with your rebellion contacts. I'll hear their pitch, see what they're about. If they're legitimate freedom fighters trying to stop genocidal maniacs, maybe we work something out. If they're just another gang of power-hungry assholes, I walk. Torin weighed this. The rebellion doesn't recruit people we can't trust. You'd need to prove yourself. Then give me a test. Some mission, some job that proves I'm not Imperial intelligence or one of Jabba's plants. Duke stubbed out his cigar on the table. I'll show your people what I can do. After that, we negotiate terms. The cantina door burst open. 3 Gamorayan guards in Jabba's livery stormed in, axes and vibroblades drawn. Behind them, a Wike enforcer with cybernetic implants pointed directly at Duke and Torin's booth. There, the Wike snarled in accented basic. Jabba wants the traitor and the Terran brought to the palace. Alive, if possible. Dead, if necessary. Duke sighed. Can't even finish a drink in this galaxy. The Gamorreans charged, their pig-like faces twisted in aggressive determination. Torin grabbed his blaster, but Duke was faster. He kicked the table up, sending drinks flying, and used the makeshift shield to rush the nearest Gamorrean. The guard's axe embedded itself in the table's surface, stuck, giving Duke the opening to deliver a devastating uppercut that lifted the alien off his feet. Torin fired past Duke, his blaster bolt catching the second Gamorrean in the shoulder. The creature squealed but kept coming, vibro blade humming with deadly energy. Duke ducked under the wild swing, grabbed a bottle from the bar, and smashed it over the Gamorrean's skull. The alien went down in a shower of glass and alcohol. The third Gamorrean showed more intelligence, circling to flank while the Weekay drew a disruptor pistol. Duke's hands moved to his Devastators, but Torin shouted a warning. "Disruptor! Those things disintegrate organic matter." Great. Just great. Duke dove behind the bar as a crimson beam vaporized the spot where he'd been standing. The beam cut through the wooden bar like a lightsaber through butter, the smell of charred wood filling the cantina. Patrons were fleeing now, scrambling for exits. The bartender had disappeared through a back door, abandoning his establishment to the violence. The third Gamorrean used the chaos to charge Duke's position, axe raised for a killing blow. Duke came up from behind the bar with a full bottle of whatever the local rotgut was and hurled it at the Gamorrean's face. The bottle shattered and the alien reeled backward, blinded by stinging alcohol. Duke followed up with both Devastators, the explosive rounds punching through the Gamorrean's tough hide and dropping him permanently. The Weekay fired again, the disruptor beam tracking Duke's movement. Duke rolled, came up beside Torin's booth, and grabbed the mechanic. "Time to go." They crashed through a side window in a shower of transparent steel fragments, hitting the alley outside in a controlled tumble. Blaster bolts and disruptor beams chased them, scorching the walls. Duke and Torin sprinted through the maze of alleys, their pursuers' shouts echoing behind them. "Your cantina!" Torin gasped as they ran. "You destroyed another cantina." "It was a shithole anyway." Duke vaulted over a garbage container, his boots pounding the dusty ground. "Where's your speeder?" 2 blocks east, blue and silver, near the water vaporator." They burst onto a main street, scattering pedestrians. More of Jabba's thugs were converging, a coordinated effort to trap them. Duke counted at least 8 hostiles, with more appearing from side streets. Jabba was serious about making an example. Torin's speeder was exactly where he'd said, a beat-up civilian model that had seen better decades. They jumped in as blaster fire erupted around them. Duke took the controls. Torin was a decent shot, but clearly not a pursuit driver. The speeder lurched forward with a whine of stressed repulsors. Duke slammed the accelerator, and they rocketed down the street at speeds that made Torin grab the dashboard and pray. "You don't know how to drive this," Torin shouted over the wind. "I'm learning." Duke swerved around a cargo hauler, clipped a vendor's stall, and sent fruit flying in all directions. Behind them, 3 speeder bikes with Jabba's enforcers gave chase, their engines screaming. Duke grinned as blaster bolts streaked past. This was more like it. High-speed chase, enemies on his tail, impossible odds. Just like Los Angeles when the aliens invaded, except with more sand and worse traffic. He jerked the controls hard left, sending the speeder into a power slide that brought them into a narrow alley. The speeder bikes followed, their smaller profiles giving them an advantage in the tight space. Duke's mind raced, calculating angles and trajectories. "Hold on to something." Duke yanked the speeder into a vertical climb, using the alley walls like a half-pipe. They shot out onto a rooftop, catching air for a breathless second before crashing down onto another street level. 2 of the speeder bikes couldn't make the maneuver. They crashed into each other in a fireball of twisted metal and screaming engines. The third bike's driver was either incredibly skilled or incredibly lucky, because he made the jump and kept pursuing. Shoot him! Duke shouted to Torin. I'm trying. Torin twisted in his seat, firing backward. His shots were wild, panicked, missing the weaving speeder bike by meters. Duke made a command decision. He slammed the brakes, throwing their speeder into a reverse spin. The pursuing bike shot past them, its driver surprised by the sudden maneuver. Duke drew a Devastator one-handed and fired. The explosive round caught the speeder bike's engine. The vehicle disintegrated in midair, the rider tumbling through smoke and flame before hitting the ground hard. Duke accelerated again, steering them toward the spaceport district. You said you know the rebellion. Time to cash in those contacts. I need a ship, weapons, and a reason to stick around this miserable dust ball. Torin was pale, gripping his seat like it was the only solid thing in a universe gone mad. There's a safe house. Rebel cell operates out of there. They can get you off-world. Then that's where we're going. Duke checked his rear scanner. More pursuers incoming, but they'd bought themselves breathing room. After this, your rebellion owes me. Big time. After this, Torin said, actually laughing despite the terror. They'll either recruit you or shoot you. Possibly both. Duke's grin was fierce in the Tatooine twilight. I'd like to see them try. The rebels' safe house was a moisture farm on Tatooine's northern wastes. Far enough from Mos Espa to avoid Imperial patrols, but close enough to monitor spaceport traffic. Duke and Torin ditched the damaged speeder 3 kilometers out and approached on foot as the twin suns set, painting the desert in shades of blood orange and purple. 2 sentries intercepted them before they reached the compound, a human woman with a scarred face and a Bothan male whose fur bristled with suspicion. Both had blaster rifles trained on Duke before Torin could raise his hands in greeting. Easy, Torin called out. It's me, Torin Vel. I'm bringing a potential asset. We heard about the mess in Mos Espa, the woman said, her rifle never wavering from Duke's center mass. Jabba's putting out word that you betrayed him. And this one, she nodded at Duke, is wanted by the Empire, Jabba's organization, and half the bounty hunters in the sector. That's not an asset. That's a liability. A liability who just fought Boba Fett to a standstill and protected a rebel operative, Duke said casually. But hey, if you'd rather I take my talents elsewhere, just say so. I'm sure the Empire would love to hear about this cozy little farm. The woman's eyes narrowed dangerously. The Bothan's fur flattened in preparation for violence. Torin stepped between them, hands raised. Commander Suresh, please. Duke saved my life. He walked away from 50,000 credits to protect me. He's rough around the edges, but he's legitimate. Commander Suresh studied Duke with the hard gaze of someone who'd seen too many informants, spies, and betrayals. She was maybe 40 standard years, her face lined with stress and combat trauma, her body carrying the lean muscle of a career soldier. This was no idealistic recruit. This was a survivor. Inside, she said finally, lowering her rifle. But if you try anything at all, I'll put a bolt through your brain before you can blink. Charming. Duke followed them into the compound, noting defensive positions, weapons caches, and escape routes automatically. Old habits. The moisture farm's interior had been converted into a makeshift operations center. Holographic displays showed Imperial fleet movements. Communications equipment hummed with encrypted chatter. A dozen rebels, humans, Twi'leks, a Duro, and what looked like a Mon Calamari, worked at various stations. They all stopped when Duke entered, hands moving toward weapons. This is Duke Nukem, Torin announced. The one from the Mos Eisley garrison attack. A ripple of recognition went through the room. The garrison attack had become legendary in the 48 hours since it happened. 27 stormtroopers dead and AT-ST destroyed, and the attacker had simply walked away. The kind of story that spread through underground networks like wildfire. "Sit," Suresh commanded, pointing to a chair. "Talk, and convince me why I shouldn't just shoot you as an Imperial plant." Duke sat, completely at ease despite being surrounded by suspicious rebels with itchy trigger fingers. He'd faced tougher crowds. "You want my credentials? Fine. I'm from Earth. Don't bother looking it up. It's not in your star charts. I got pulled into this galaxy through a teleporter accident while fighting an alien invasion. Been here 2 days. In that time, I've killed Imperial soldiers, refused a contract from Jabba the Hutt, fought Boba Fett, and protected one of your operatives. If I was working for the Empire, I'm doing a piss-poor job of it." "Earth," the Mon Calamari said, his bulbous eyes blinking. "Never heard of it. Could be a cover story." "Could be," Duke agreed. "Or it could be the truth and you're wasting time while Jabba's thugs track us here." He leaned forward. "Here's the reality. I don't know your rebellion, don't know your cause beyond fight the Empire. But I know fascist oppressors when I see them. The Empire blew up a planet. They enslave people. They rule through fear. That's the kind of enemy I've built my career destroying. Your career." Suresh's tone was skeptical. "Alien exterminator, hero, icon, legend. Take your pick." Duke pulled out a cigar, then thought better of it given the confined space. "Look, I'm not asking to join your revolution. I'm asking for a mutually beneficial arrangement. I need a ship and weapons. You need someone who can walk into impossible situations and walk out covered in enemy blood. Seems like we can help each other." The rebels exchanged glances, silent communication passing between them. Finally, Suresh spoke. "Even if we believe you, and that's a big if, we can't just hand ships and weapons to every trigger-happy mercenary who wanders in. The rebellion operates on trust, earned through sacrifice and proven loyalty." "Then give me a test," Duke said, repeating his offer to Torin. "Some mission that proves I'm worth the risk. Something your people can't or won't do. I'll handle it, and we'll see if we're compatible." Suresh considered this. The holographic display behind her showed Imperial fleet movements. Star destroyers repositioning, TIE fighter patrols, garrison reinforcements. The Empire's grip on Tatooine was tightening. "There is something," she admitted slowly. "But it's a suicide mission. Even our best operatives refused it. My specialty." Duke grinned. "What's the target?" Suresh manipulated the holo display. An Imperial facility materialized, a fortified garrison built into a desert canyon, bristling with weapons emplacements, patrol routes marked in red, and a security perimeter that would make a paranoid dictator proud. "Imperial Intelligence Station Aurex-7, Suresh explained. "They're holding a prisoner, Captain Ralith Kin, one of our best tactical officers. He was captured 3 weeks ago during a supply raid. The Empire's been interrogating him, trying to break him for information on rebel cells across the Outer Rim." "And you want me to break him out?" Duke studied the hologram, his tactical mind already working. Heavy defenses, but concentrated. Guard rotations predictable. Air support minimal. TIE patrols every 4 hours. Doable with the right approach and enough explosives. "We want you to try," the Bothan corrected. "Captain Kin is tough, but even the toughest break eventually. He knows too much. If you can extract him, you save dozens of rebel lives. If you can't, you'll at least know I tried and probably died, which proves I wasn't Imperial." Duke finished. Smart. Callous, but smart. It's war, Suresh said flatly. Sentiment gets people killed. Duke stood, walking around the hologram to examine it from different angles. The facility was impressive by this galaxy's standards. Force fields, turbo laser towers, scanning equipment. But Duke had stormed alien hives, defended by organic plasma cannons and psychically controlled defense systems. This was just another fort to crack. I'll need equipment, Duke said. Explosives, ammunition for my weapons, if you can fabricate it, and detailed schematics of the facility's interior. We can provide local ordnance. Your weapons. Suresh gestured to a Duro technician. Let us examine them. We'll see what we can do. Duke reluctantly handed over one of his Devastators. The Duro took it with reverent care, his large eyes widening at the weapon's design. Fascinating, the technician murmured. Chemical propellant, explosive projectiles, mechanical firing mechanism. Primitive by our standards, but elegant. Brutal efficiency. He looked up at Duke. We can't replicate your ammunition exactly, but we can fabricate something similar using Tibanna gas charges and modified casings. Won't be identical, but functionally equivalent. Good enough. Duke turned back to Suresh. When do I leave? Dawn. That gives you 6 hours to rest, plan, and prepare. The garrison does a shift change at 0900. That's your window. 30 minutes of minimal staffing before reinforcements cycle in. 30 minutes. Duke nodded. Plenty of time. You're insane, Torin said, speaking up for the first time since they'd entered. That facility has 60 Stormtroopers, automated defenses, and Imperial intelligence officers who are trained to expect extraction attempts. You'll die before you reach the outer perimeter. Kid, I've broken into alien motherships with less planning and worse odds. Duke clapped Torin on the shoulder hard enough to make the mechanic stumble. Besides, dying's boring. I prefer winning. Suresh allowed herself the ghost of a smile. If you somehow pull this off, we'll talk terms. Ship, weapons, and a place in the rebellion, if you want it. And if I don't pull it off, then you'll be dead, and we'll mourn you for about 5 minutes before moving on to the next crisis. Suresh's honesty was brutal, but refreshing. That's the reality of fighting the Empire. We're all expendable. The cause is what matters. Duke respected that. No false promises, no emotional manipulation, just cold practicality. And these rebels were serious, hardened by loss and still fighting despite impossible odds. Fair enough. Duke retrieved his Devastator from the technician. Get me those schematics and ammunition. I've got a prison break to plan. As the rebels dispersed to their tasks, Torin pulled Duke aside. You don't have to do this. There are other ways to prove yourself. This is the way that matters, Duke said quietly. Your Captain Kin is worth saving, and I need to see what I'm really dealing with here. How tough these Imperial bastards actually are when I'm bringing the fight to them. You really think you can get him out alive? Duke's grin was pure confidence. Kid, I've rescued presidents, saved strippers from alien abduction, and liberated entire cities. One Imperial prison? That's just Tuesday. The next 6 hours were spent in preparation. Duke studied the facility schematics until he could navigate them blindfolded. The Duro technician delivered 400 rounds of makeshift ammunition that wouldn't be quite as explosive as Duke's Earth ordnance, but would still punch through Stormtrooper armor. The rebels provided thermal detonators, shaped charges, and a personal shield generator that might buy him a few extra seconds in a firefight. Duke checked and rechecked his gear with the methodical precision of someone who'd survived by being prepared. Devastators loaded and holstered, pipe bombs, 6 remaining supplemented by 8 thermal detonators. Combat knife sharpened, shield generator tested and functional, every piece of equipment accounted for. As dawn approached, Duke stood alone on the moisture farm's perimeter, watching the twin suns rise over the desert. Somewhere out there, Captain Kin was being tortured for information. Somewhere out there, the Empire thought it was untouchable. Duke Nukem was about to teach them differently. The Imperial Intelligence Station squatted in the canyon like a technological tumor, all harsh angles and Imperial gray. Duke observed it from a rocky outcropping 2 clicks out, using macro binoculars borrowed from the rebels. Guard towers at each corner, automated turrets tracking movement patterns, force field generators humming with lethal energy. The main entrance was a kill zone, deliberate choke point designed to funnel attackers into overlapping fields of fire, which was why Duke wasn't using the main entrance. He'd studied the schematics for hours, finding what every fortress designer eventually included: utility access. The facility needed power, water reclamation, waste disposal. That meant conduits, maintenance shafts, and vulnerable points where function trumped security. Duke found his entry point on the canyon's eastern wall, a thermal exhaust port feeding into the facility's cooling system. Too small for most humans, but Duke had squeezed through tighter spaces while escaping alien hives. The cooling system fed directly into the detention block's lower levels. From there, he'd have to fight his way up 3 floors, locate Captain Kin, and extract before the entire garrison converged on his position. Simple, suicidal, perfect. At 08:55, Duke made his move. He rappelled down the canyon wall using fiber cord from the rebel supplies, boots finding purchase on the rock face. The morning shift change was beginning. Guards rotating positions, attention divided between incoming and outgoing personnel. 30 minutes of confusion. Duke intended to use every second. The exhaust port was exactly where the schematics indicated, protected by a Durasteel grate that Duke pried off with his combat knife. The opening beyond was dark, narrow, and reeked of recycled air and ozone. Duke squeezed inside, his broad shoulders scraping against the metal conduit. The shaft descended at a 45-degree angle, too steep to climb down safely and too smooth to provide handholds. Duke braced himself against the walls and controlled his descent through friction and stubbornness. The metal was hot, heated by the thermal exchange systems, but his gloves protected his palms. After 30 meters, the shaft leveled out and connected to a larger maintenance corridor. Duke dropped into the passage, Devastators already drawn. Emergency lighting cast everything in red, and the air tasted of metal and chemicals. He consulted his mental map. Detention block was north, 2 levels up. The corridor terminated at a security door. Duke examined the locking mechanism, electronic keypad with biometric scanner. High-tech by this galaxy's standards. But Duke had cracked alien technology that operated on quantum probability. He pulled a bypass device the Duro technician had provided, slapped it onto the lock, and watched it cycle through encryption keys. 15 seconds later, the door hissed open. Duke entered a maintenance bay filled with power generators and climate control equipment. 2 technicians in Imperial jumpsuits looked up in shock. Before either could sound an alarm, Duke crossed the distance and delivered precise strikes. 1 punch to solar plexus, 1 chop to the throat. Both technicians dropped, unconscious, but alive. Duke wasn't interested in killing support staff. The Stormtroopers and intelligence officers were fair game, but technicians were just doing their jobs. He cable-tied their hands and gagged them with their own uniforms, then dragged them into a storage alcove. The facility's layout matched the schematics perfectly. Duke moved through service corridors, avoiding main passages where patrols would be concentrated. He passed commissaries, barracks, administrative offices, the mundane infrastructure that kept an Imperial facility functioning. At the detention block entrance, Duke encountered his first real obstacle. 2 Stormtroopers standing guard, E-11 blasters at ready, scanning the corridor with disciplined vigilance. Duke could have used stealth, could have tried to bypass them entirely. But time was critical, and subtlety had never been his strong suit. He stepped into the corridor and opened fire. Both Devastators roared in perfect synchronization. The explosive rounds hit the Stormtroopers before they could raise their weapons, the kinetic force sending them crashing backward into the detention block door. Alarms shrieked immediately. Duke's presence was now known to every Imperial in the facility. "Let's dance," Duke muttered, kicking open the door. The detention block was a narrow corridor lined with cells, each protected by ray shields that crackled with energy. Stormtroopers were already responding to the alarm, pouring in from security stations. Duke met them with sustained fire, his Devastators punching through armor with mechanical precision. 3 Stormtroopers went down in the first exchange. 4 more took cover behind detention consoles, returning fire with their blasters. Red energy bolts scorched the air around Duke as he dove behind a cell support column. The Rebel shield generator activated automatically, absorbing 2 direct hits before its capacitors overloaded. Duke pulled a thermal detonator, primed it, and rolled it down the corridor. "Fire in the hole." The detonator exploded with devastating force, the blast wave crumpling Stormtroopers like paper dolls and destroying the detention consoles in a shower of sparks and flames. Duke charged through the smoke, boots crunching on debris, looking for his target. "Captain Kin," Duke shouted over the alarm klaxons. "Where are you?" "Cell 17. A voice responded from deeper in the block, hoarse but strong. "Who the hell are you?" "You're right out of here." Duke found Cell 17, its ray shield flickering from the detonator's electromagnetic pulse. Inside, a human male in tattered rebel fatigues looked like he'd been through hell. Bruised face, broken fingers, burn marks from interrogation. But his eyes were clear and defiant. Duke shot the shield generator, and the ray shield collapsed. Captain Raleth Kin stumbled out, unsteady but mobile. "Can you fight?" Duke asked, offering him a liberated E-11 blaster. "I can walk and shoot," Kin said, taking the weapon with his functional hand. "That'll have to be enough." More Stormtroopers were converging from both ends of the corridor. Duke and Kin positioned themselves back to back, creating a 2-man defensive position that maximized their firing angles. "On 3, we move to the east stairwell," Duke said. "I'll lead. You cover our 6. Don't be a hero. If you go down, this whole thing's for nothing." "You always this optimistic during rescues?" Kin's sense of humor was intact despite the torture. "Only on Tuesdays." Duke counted down. 3. They moved as one, Duke's Devastators clearing a path while Kin's blaster kept pursuers at bay. The detention block became a killing field, Stormtroopers falling in disciplined but futile attempts to contain the breakout. Duke's tactical instincts guided them through the chaos, never staying in one position, always moving, using the facility's own layout against its defenders. The stairwell was a vertical shaft with emergency ladders. Duke went up first, firing blindly above to discourage ambushes. Kin followed, his injured hand making each rung agonizing, but his determination never wavering. They emerged on the main level into a nightmare. Dozens of Stormtroopers had formed firing lines, supported by an Imperial officer barking orders. The main entrance was 100 meters away, blocked by overwhelming force. "We're not getting out that way." Kin observed with grim professionalism. Good thing I've got a better idea. Duke pulled his remaining pipe bombs and thermal detonators, arranging them in his vest like a bandolier of death. How attached are you to this facility remaining standing? Not even a little bit. Outstanding. Duke pointed to a structural support column on the facility's southern wall. That column supports the garrison's east wing. We blow it, the whole section collapses. Creates chaos, opens up the canyon wall, gives us an exit. That's insane. Again with the insanity accusations. Duke grinned. You rebels really need to work on your sense of adventure. They fought their way toward the support column, every step contested by Imperial forces. Duke's ammunition was depleting rapidly, his Devastators down to 2 magazines each. Kin's blaster was overheating from sustained fire. The odds were deteriorating with every passing second. An Imperial officer, intelligence branch based on his uniform, stepped into their path with a heavy blaster pistol. Surrender. You're surrounded, outgunned, and outmatched. Duke's response was to shoot him in the chest with an explosive round that sent the officer flying backward through a viewport. I really hate officers, Duke muttered, reaching the support column. He placed every remaining explosive against its base. Pipe bombs, thermal detonators, shaped charges, creating an improvised demolition that would have made any sapper proud. This is going to bring down half the facility, Kin warned. That's the idea. Start running when I blow this. Don't stop, don't look back, just run for the canyon wall breach. What about you? I'll be right behind you. Probably. Duke activated the detonators with a 30-second timer and opened fire on the advancing Stormtroopers, buying Kin time to reach the exit. The captain ran, limping but determined, blaster firing sporadically to keep Imperial heads down. 20 seconds. Duke backed toward the exit, his Devastators empty now, switching to a liberated E-11 that felt wrong in his hands, but still shot straight. 10 seconds. The Imperials realized what was about to happen, their advance faltering as self-preservation overrode duty. 5 seconds. Duke sprinted for the exit. 0. The explosion was apocalyptic. The support column disintegrated, and the entire eastern section of the facility collapsed inward like a house of cards. Structural integrity failed catastrophically, and tons of Durasteel, permacrete, and military hardware crashed down in a chain reaction that consumed everything. Duke felt the shockwave hit his back, lifting him off his feet and throwing him through the air. He crashed through debris, rolled with the impact, and somehow ended up sliding down the canyon wall in an avalanche of rock and Imperial wreckage. When the dust settled, Duke lay at the canyon bottom, battered and bleeding, but alive. His ego system was working overtime, healing cracked ribs and a dislocated shoulder. 50 meters away, Captain Kin had also survived, sprawled on the sand and laughing hysterically. "You're absolutely insane," Kin shouted, his voice echoing in the canyon. Duke pushed himself upright, spat blood, and surveyed the ruined facility. "Yeah, but we're alive. That's what counts." A rebel speeder appeared over the canyon rim, Torin at the controls, with Commander Suresh manning a mounted blaster. They descended rapidly, touching down beside the 2 survivors. "Get in," Suresh commanded. "Imperial reinforcements are 3 minutes out." Duke hauled Kin into the speeder and collapsed into a seat. As they accelerated away from the smoking ruins, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. 1 prison break, 1 facility destroyed, 1 rebel captain rescued. Not bad for his 3rd day in this galaxy. The return to the rebel safe house was a blur of adrenaline and exhaustion. Duke's body ached, his ego system working to mend a dozen new injuries. but his mind was already cataloging the mission's successes and failures. The speeder tore across the desert, the smoking ruin of the Imperial Intelligence Station shrinking in the distance, replaced on the horizon by the ominous silhouette of a star destroyer moving into low orbit. The Empire's response was swift and brutal. Inside the moisture farm, the atmosphere was electric. The rebels who had viewed Duke with suspicion hours earlier now looked at him with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Captain Kin was immediately taken to the med bay, his broken hand being treated by a field medic. Commander Suresh stood before a holographic map, her face grim. "You did it," she said, her voice devoid of its earlier coldness. "You actually did it. But you've also kicked the nest. That Star Destroyer is the Virulence. It carries a full complement of Stormtroopers and, according to our intelligence, an Inquisitor." "An Inquisitor?" Torin asked, his face pale. "Here?" "The Empire doesn't take the destruction of a high-value facility lightly," Suresh replied, her eyes fixed on Duke. "They're not just hunting you anymore, Nukem. They're cleansing the sector. Ground patrols have tripled. They're sweeping every settlement, every farm. They'll find us. It's only a matter of time." Duke leaned against a console, reloading his Devastators with the last of the rebel-fabricated ammunition. "So we move, or we fight. Sitting here waiting for them to show up seems like a bad plan." "Fight," a young Twi'lek rebel scoffed. "Fight a Star Destroyer? With what? Blasters and hope?" "Kid, I fought wars with less," Duke said, his tone dangerously calm. "But you're right. We need an edge. Suresh, you promised me a ship and weapons if I pulled this off. Time to pay up." Suresh nodded, making a decision. "We have a GR-75 medium transport, the Starlight Runner, prepped in a hidden hangar not far from here. It's not a warship, but it's space-worthy. It's yours. As for weapons..." She gestured to an arms locker being opened by two rebels. Inside were blaster rifles, pistols, and crates of thermal detonators. "Take what you need, but it won't be enough against the Virulence." "We don't need to beat the Star Destroyer," Duke said, a predatory glint in his eye. "We just need to get its attention. Draw it away from the ground forces so you and your people can evacuate." "A suicide run?" Suresh shook her head. "That transport is unarmed. The Virulence would vaporize it before you left the atmosphere." "Who said anything about running?" Duke's grin was back. "You said there's an Inquisitor on that ship, the Empire's big bad Force user. They're arrogant. They think they're untouchable." He strapped a bandolier of thermal detonators across his chest. "I'm going to pay him a visit. Personally." A stunned silence filled the room. Even the veteran rebels stared at Duke as if he'd just declared his intention to breathe vacuum. "You can't be serious," Torin finally breathed. "Board a Star Destroyer? Alone?" "It's not my first rodeo," Duke said, checking the charge on a captured E-11. "Big ship, lots of corridors, thousands of enemies, standard operating procedure. I'll cause enough chaos in their backyard that they'll forget all about this dust ball. You get your people to that transport and get off world." "And what about you?" Suresh asked, her professional demeanor cracking for the first time, revealing a flicker of genuine concern. "I'll improvise." Duke slammed a fresh magazine into a Devastator. "Always do." The plan was madness, but it was the only plan they had. While the rebels began their frantic evacuation, Duke commandeered a stolen Imperial Lambda-class shuttle that the cell had been hiding in a canyon hangar. Its codes were outdated, but the chaos he intended to create would be cover enough. As he powered up the shuttle's engines, Torin ran up the ramp. "I'm coming with you." "The hell you are," Duke grunted, not looking up from the pre-flight checks. "You need a co-pilot who actually knows how to fly this thing," Torin insisted. "And you'll need someone to watch your back. You might be a one-man army, but even you can't be everywhere at once." Duke looked at the mechanic. The fear was still in Torin's eyes, but it was now outweighed by a hardened resolve. He'd seen too much, lost too much to simply run. Duke saw a reflection of himself, a man tired of hiding, ready to fight back. "Fine," Duke said. "But you do what I say, when I say it. No heroics, understood?" "Understood." The shuttle lifted off, its repulsors kicking up a storm of sand. As they ascended through Tatooine atmosphere, the virulence filled the viewport, a dagger of Imperial might against the blackness of space. Warning chimes immediately blared as the Star Destroyer's tractor beam attempted to lock on. "They're hailing us," Torin said, his hands dancing across the console. "Imperial codes are being challenged." "Answer it," Duke said, strapping himself into the pilot's seat. "And look busy." A hologram of an Imperial communications officer flickered to life. "Unidentified shuttle. You are entering restricted space. Transmit your clearance codes immediately, or you will be fired upon." Duke leaned into the transmitter's view. "Yeah, about that," he said, flashing a grin. "My codes are in the mail, but I've got a personal message for your Inquisitor." The officer's eyes widened in confusion and then alarm. "What is the meaning of this? Identify yourself." "The name's Nukem, Duke Nukem." He winked. "Tell that red lightsaber-toting freak I've come to chew bubblegum and kick ass." He punched a button, terminating the transmission. "And I'm all out of bubblegum. Torin, plot a collision course for their main hangar bay." "What? They'll shoot us down." "That's what I'm counting on." Duke slammed the thrusters to full power. The shuttle surged forward, a speck of metal hurling itself at a giant. Alarms shrieked as TIE fighters scrambled from the Virulence's launch bays, their green laser bolts streaking past the cockpit. "They're not shooting to kill," Torin yelled. "They want to disable us." "Too bad for them." Duke yanked the controls, sending the shuttle into a violent spin, dodging the disabling shots. He targeted the hangar bay's magnetic containment field generator. "I'm not here to be captured." He fired the shuttle's laser cannons. The shots were inaccurate, wild, but they served their purpose, distracting the point defense gunners for a critical half-second. That was all the opening Duke needed. He overrode the safety protocols and fired the shuttle's emergency landing thrusters at full power, turning the vehicle into a giant, unguided missile. "Brace for impact," he roared. The shuttle tore through the magnetic containment field in a shower of sparks and screaming metal. It plowed into the deck of the main hangar bay, shearing the wings off parked TIE fighters and carving a trench of destruction through the pristine Imperial facility. The inertial dampeners failed at the last second, and the crash was a universe-ending slam that threw Duke and Torin against their restraints. Dazed, ears ringing, Duke unbuckled himself. The shuttle was a wreck, half buried in the carcass of a TIE bomber. Through the cracked viewport, he could see Stormtroopers and deck crew scrambling, some fleeing, others forming defensive positions. "You alive?" Duke shouted to Torin. "I think so." The mechanic groaned, clutching a bleeding cut on his forehead. "Remind me never to let you pilot anything again." "Noted." Duke kicked the damaged cockpit hatch open, Devastators in hand. "Welcome to the party." He leapt from the shuttle into the chaos, his boots landing on the scarred deck plating. The first squad of stormtroopers to approach him met a hail of explosive rounds that turned the hangar into a charnel house. Duke moved with purpose, a force of nature in a confined space. He wasn't here to capture or negotiate. He was here to send a message. He fought his way toward the hangar's main blast doors, Torin providing covering fire from the shuttle's wreckage with a liberated blaster rifle. The goal was the bridge, but Duke knew he wouldn't get that far. The real target would come to him. He was right. As he reached the blast doors, they hissed open not to reveal more stormtroopers, but a single figure. Clad in black robes, face obscured by a menacing helmet, the figure held a crimson lightsaber that hummed with malevolent energy. The air grew cold, and Duke felt a pressure in his mind, an alien presence trying to slither into his thoughts. The Inquisitor. The Terran, a voice echoed, both through the helmet's vocabulator and directly in Duke's mind. The one who defies the natural order. Your destruction will be a lesson to this galaxy. The Inquisitor gestured, and a massive tool cart flew through the air toward Duke. He dove aside, the cart smashing into the wall where he'd been standing. The Inquisitor advanced, lightsaber held in a classic Form V stance. Your primitive weapons are no match for the power of the dark side, the Inquisitor hissed. Duke rose to his feet, dusting off his shoulders. Yeah, I've heard that before. He raised his Devastators. Let's dance. He fired. The Inquisitor's lightsaber became a blur of red, deflecting the explosive rounds with impossible speed. The detonations lit up the hangar, but the Inquisitor stood untouched, each shot harmlessly redirected. Futile, the Inquisitor said, and force pushed Duke with enough power to send him flying backward. He crashed into a stack of cargo containers, the wind knocked from his lungs. His ego system surged, fighting to repair the damage. He got to one knee, spitting blood. The Inquisitor was walking toward him, a predator toying with its prey. You see, the Inquisitor gloated, you are nothing, a speck, a temporary anomaly that the Empire will erase. Duke's hand found a thermal detonator on his bandolier. He primed it, but the Inquisitor simply flicked a finger, and the detonator was ripped from Duke's grasp, clattering harmlessly across the deck. Your technology is a crutch, the Inquisitor said, now standing over Duke. A pitiful attempt to emulate true power. Duke looked up, his body screaming in protest, but his grin was unwavering. You talk too much. He lunged forward, not with a weapon, but with his fist. It was a stupid, desperate move, and the Inquisitor easily sidestepped it, bringing the lightsaber around for a killing blow. But Duke's lunge had been a feint. His real target was the Inquisitor's lightsaber hilt. As the crimson blade swept toward his neck, Duke's other hand shot out and grabbed the Inquisitor's wrist. It was like grabbing a live power cable. Dark side energy surged through him, agony like he'd never known. But he held on. The Inquisitor, shocked by the sheer audacity and the physical contact, hesitated for a fraction of a second. That was all Duke needed. He headbutted the Inquisitor's helmet with every ounce of his enhanced strength. There was a loud crack, part helmet, part his own skull fracturing. The Inquisitor staggered back, his concentration broken. Duke didn't let go. He wrenched the Inquisitor's arm, forcing the lightsaber downward, and drove it directly into the deck plating. The superheated plasma burned through the metal, hitting something critical beneath. A power conduit, a fuel line. Duke didn't know and didn't care. A massive explosion erupted from the floor, throwing both combatants apart. Duke landed hard, his vision swimming. The Inquisitor was thrown against a support column, his robes on fire, his connection to the Force shattered by the concussive blast and the sudden, violent feedback. Alarms that were already blaring reached a new, panicked pitch. Secondary explosions rocked the hangar bay as the ruptured conduit set off a chain reaction. The entire deck was being torn apart. Torin ran to Duke's side, hauling him to his feet. "The whole bay is going to blow. We have to go." Duke looked over at the smoldering, motionless form of the Inquisitor. The message had been sent. He grabbed a sidearm from a fallen Stormtrooper and shoved it into Torin's hands. "Find an escape pod." Duke coughed, his body struggling to heal. "Get back to the surface." "What about you?" Duke looked toward the heart of the ship, where the bridge awaited. The Virulence was wounded, but still functional. Its attention was firmly on the internal threat. The Star Destroyer was no longer hunting rebels on Tatooine. It was fighting for its life. "I'm not done yet," Duke said. The hangar was a vision of hell. Fires raged where TIE fighters had been, and secondary explosions tore through support structures, raining molten debris from the ceiling. The air was thick with smoke and the screams of the wounded and dying. Through the chaos, Duke moved with a singular, bloody-minded purpose. The Inquisitor was down, but the head of the snake remained. He was going to cut it off. Torin grabbed his arm. "Duke, this is insane. The ship is breaking apart. We need to get to an escape pod." "Then go!" Duke shouted over the roar of the flames. "Get back to Saresh. Tell her the Empire's attention is elsewhere." "And what? You're just going to storm the bridge alone?" "Looks that way." Duke ejected the spent magazines from his Devastators. He was down to his last full clip. He slammed it home with a satisfying click. "This is what I do, kid. I find the biggest, baddest son of a bitch in the room, and I make an example out of him." He didn't wait for a reply. He turned and ran, not away from the inferno, but deeper into it, toward the main blast doors that led into the Star Destroyer's spine. Torin watched him go for a heart-stopping moment. The lone figure in the red tank top charging into the heart of Imperial power, then turned and sprinted for the rows of escape pods. The image of Duke's back burned into his memory. The corridors of the Virulence were pandemonium. Stormtroopers ran in disciplined but panicked squads, heading toward the catastrophic damage in the hangar, not expecting the source of that damage to be coming the other way. Duke gave them no time to react. He moved like a phantom, a whirlwind of controlled violence. He didn't waste ammo on sustained firefights. A pipe bomb tossed around a corner to scatter a squad, a point-blank Devastator round to the chest of an officer, a brutal close-quarters takedown with his combat knife. He was a surgical instrument of chaos, cutting a path of pure, unadulterated destruction toward the command deck. His ego system was a furnace inside him, burning through his reserves to knit together broken bones and seal torn flesh. Every new injury was a fresh burst of agony, followed by the eerie, warm sensation of rapid cellular regeneration. He was running on fumes and pure, unadulterated ego, and it was enough. He found a turbo lift, but the security lockdown had sealed it. With a grunt of effort, he pried the doors open with his bare hands, the muscles in his back and arms screaming in protest. The lift shaft was a dark, vertical chasm. He looked up. The bridge was dozens of levels above. He pulled a grappling hook and fiber cord from his belt, standard issue for Earth's alien infestations, fired it upward, and began to climb, hand over hand, his boots braced against the smooth walls. Alarms blared throughout the shaft. He could feel the ship shuddering around him, the damage from the hangar explosion cascading through vital systems. He passed level after level, occasionally seeing startled faces of Imperial personnel through the small viewports in the lift doors. He ignored them. He had one target. After what felt like an eternity, he reached the bridge level. He planted a shaped charge on the lift door, ducked his head, and detonated it. The door blew inward in a shower of metal. He swung through the opening, Devastators raised, and found himself in the nerve center of the Imperial warship. The bridge was a scene of organized panic. Officers rushed between stations, calling out damage reports, their voices tight with fear. In the center of it all, standing before the massive viewport that showed the swirling blue and white of Tatooine below, was the ship's captain, a tall, severe man with a face like carved stone. He turned as Duke entered, his composure cracking for a single, horrified second. "You," the captain spat. "How did you get here?" "I took the stairs," Duke said, striding forward. Every officer on the bridge froze, hands hovering near sidearms they knew they'd never clear from their holsters. "Nice ship you got here. Shame if something happened to it." "Kill him," the captain screamed. Two brave, or foolish, officers drew their blasters. Duke shot them both before their weapons were fully raised, the explosive rounds throwing their bodies back over their consoles. The message was clear. The next person to move dies. Duke walked up to the captain, ignoring the terrified crew. "You sent an Inquisitor after me. That was rude." "You are one man," the captain seethed, his hand inching toward a concealed alarm. "You cannot hope to win." "Captain, I've won already." Duke gestured with one of his pistols at the viewport. "Your hangar's a wreck, your fancy Force user is taking a nap, and your ship is bleeding atmosphere. But mostly, you're not bombing Tatooine anymore, are you? You're a little busy." The captain's face twisted in fury. "The Empire will hunt you to the ends of the galaxy." "Yeah, they can get in line." Duke's smile was cold. "Now, you're going to order a full retreat. Take this broken bucket out of the Tatooine system." "Never." Duke pressed the barrel of his Devastator against the captain's forehead. It wasn't a request. For a long moment, the only sound was the frantic beeping of damaged systems and the ragged breathing of the bridge crew. The captain's eyes darted around, looking for a way out, finding none. He saw his own death in Duke's eyes, and he knew it wasn't an empty threat. He swallowed hard. "All hands," he said, his voice trembling with shame. "This is the captain. Disengage from Tatooine orbit. Plot a course for the Imperial Fleet rendezvous at Bespin. Maximum hyperspace jump." A collective sigh of relief, mixed with humiliation, swept the bridge. Officers began frantically working their consoles. On the viewport, the planet of Tatooine began to shrink as the massive Star Destroyer turned away. Duke kept his pistol pressed to the captain's head. "Smart move." He leaned in close. "Now, you're going to tell every Imperial from here to Coruscant what happened here today. You tell them that one man walked onto your ship, kicked your ass, and sent you running. You tell them the name Duke Nukem is a name they need to learn to fear." He lowered his weapon, turned his back on the entire bridge crew, the ultimate show of contempt, and walked calmly back toward the shattered turbolift door. No one moved to stop him. They were too stunned, too broken. He descended the cable, his body aching with a fatigue that went deeper than bone. When he reached the hangar level, or what was left of it, he found it mostly abandoned, a burning, depressurized tomb. He made his way to a secondary hangar, where a single damaged TIE fighter sat. Its solar panel wings cracked, but the cockpit intact. It was a tight fit, and the controls were alien, but the basic principles were the same. Power, thrust, direction. He powered it up, the twin ion engines screaming to life. He guided the awkward craft out of the ruined hangar bay and into the blackness of space. Below him, Tatooine hung in the void, safe for now. In the distance, the Virulence, scarred and smoking, made the jump to hyperspace and vanished. Duke set a course for the planet's surface, for the coordinates Torin had transmitted to him for the rebel rendezvous. He was bruised, battered, and running on empty. But he was alive. And in this galaxy, that was a victory in itself. He had come to this galaxy as a castaway. In 3 days, he had become a legend. The man who broke a garrison, defied a Hutt, fought Boba Fett, and crippled a Star Destroyer. The Empire, the Hutts, the bounty hunters. They all knew his name now. And he was just getting started. The legend of Duke Nukem did not end with the retreat of the Virulence. It was only the beginning. In the cantinas of Mos Eisley and the secret comm channels of the Rebel Alliance, the story spread, growing with each telling. The Terran who feared nothing, the man who consumed the attention of an entire Imperial sector command and spat it back out as wreckage. He had not just survived, he had thrived, carving his name into the galaxy's history with blaster fire and pure, unadulterated nerve. For the rebellion, he became a symbol, proof that the Empire could be struck, and struck hard, by a single determined individual. For the Empire, he became a priority target, an unpredictable variable that had to be eliminated. And for Duke himself, it was Tuesday. He had found a new war against an enemy that deserved everything he could throw at it, and a cause that, despite his protests, was starting to feel like home. The galaxy would never be the same. A new force had entered the struggle between light and dark, a force that answered to no one, followed no doctrine, and played by no rules but its own. The fight for freedom had just gotten a whole lot louder.